The Lion Men of Mongo by Alex Raymond. Everything went well until 10 minutes before set-down time. The interplanet survey ship then began to have trouble. The temperature in the oval control chamber started to climb rapidly. The central control panel grew stove-hot. Tiny wisps of acrid blue smoke uncoiled from some of the grids and rows of bubble lights. Dr. Zarkov, a big, burly man with a furious black beard, had been bent over the scanning monitors, studying the multiple views of the terrain of the planet they were about to land on. "Did you expect trouble with the ship?" asked Dale Arden. She was a slim girl in her middle 20s, dark-haired, wearing a lightweight, pale blue jumpsuit. Zarkov blinked, looking up at his research assistant. "What's that?" Dale pointed in the direction of the control panels. "How serious is it, Flash?" In the piloting seat, Flash Gordon shook his head, keeping his eyes on the controls in front of him. "Don't know," he said. "I'm switching over to the backup systems and we'll see." He was a tall, broad-shouldered man, a year away from 30, with blonde hair and an even outdoor tan.
"There can't be anything wrong," boomed Zarkov. "I designed this ship myself, equipped it especially for this pioneer exploration of Mongo."
"I can't get any response from the landing mechanisms," Flash said. "We don't seem to have any control over the ship. Looks like we'll have to ditch."
"Ridiculous," snorted Zarkov. "I designed this craft to be foolproof, which I guarantee it is." He gave his ample beard a tug. "Besides which, I sank nearly all of the Plan Explo Foundation's last grant into building this crate. If it smashes up, that's $20 million in a pile of rubble."
"It's either ditch or crash," said Flash. "You and Dale get out. I'll keep fiddling. That way you two are safe, and maybe we can save the ship, too." The girl's hand tightened on his shoulder. "There's no point, Flash. It's too dangerous. Even if we lose the ship, all we have to do to get off the planet is radio back to Dr. Zarkov's orbiting workshop." "If it looks like I can't save the ship, I'll radio and get them to send a rescue craft. Now you and Doc get ready to use the escape tube." Dale sprinted to a wall cabinet and broke out 3 flying safety belts. "There's one here for you, Flash," she said. Reluctantly, Zarkov strapped on the device.
"These belts are based on my own designs, so they'll register the exact place where Dale and I land on your rescue monitor there."
Nodding, Flash said, "Once I get the ship safely down, I'll come back for you."
"Good, good. We'll stay exactly where we land and wait for you."
After strapping on the flying belt, Dale bent and kissed Flash gently on the cheek. "We'll see you soon." "I guarantee," he said, using one of the doctor's favorite phrases. The slim girl crossed to the trapdoor of the escape tube. She dropped from sight and was ejected from the craft.
$20 million isn't everything,"
reminded Zarkov as he approached the tube hatch.
"So don't be too foolhardy, Flash. If you figure you can't bring her down, jump to."
"Don't worry, Doc." The heat inside the survey ship's cabin was now up to 120 degrees, according to the temperature gauge on the control panel. Smoke was swirling thickly. Flash continued to struggle with the buttons, switches, and toggles of the intricate control board. There was still no response. 5 minutes after Dale and Zarkov had jumped free, Flash finally pushed up out of the piloting seat. "Doc and Plan Explo won't like this, but I'm going to have to give up and get out." He noted the positions where Dale and the doctor had landed. Then he strapped on his flying belt and started toward the radio communications panel in the far wall to get in touch with the robots on their orbiting workshop. But before he reached it, the ship began to wobble wildly. Flames howled out of the control board, and then the ship was plummeting down toward the ground. Flash groaned, stirring, his left hand flexing and unflexing. He lay sprawled on his back in the cabin of the wrecked survey ship on the surface of Mongo. The ship was a mess, but at least he was alive. He picked himself up, painfully, and went to the radio communications wall. "Not exactly a perfect set-down," he said, as he surveyed the wrecked cabin. He found that the communications equipment was ruined, so there was no way to report the crash. The robots in the orbiting lab were not programmed to initiate a rescue on their own. Flash swiftly made a circuit of the cabin, determining what equipment could be salvaged. He packed emergency rations, 2 extra blaster pistols, and a few other gadgets. They could come back for the rest later. It was mid-afternoon outside. Flash guessed he'd been unconscious for an hour. Walking to the emergency door, which hung lopsidedly open, he looked out. He saw a stretch of tough, brownish grass, the boles of huge palm trees. Dozens of gold insects were swirling low to the ground. He took a deep breath before dropping out of the ship and down to the soil of Mongo. He stood on the rough grass, looking up at the bright alien sun. Then he checked his compass, nodded to himself, and set off to find Zarkov and Dale. After nearly 15 minutes, he noticed he was approaching some kind of trail. Man-made, too, he guessed. The road cut through the thick jungle, and he calculated it should lead him fairly close to the spot where Dr. Zarkov should have come down. And then, on the far side of the road, he saw a huge, twisted, oak-like tree. Hanging from it was a dead man. He had obviously been hanging there a good while. The thick chains which held his wrists and ankles together were rusted. The rope which had broken his neck was now a greasy black. The sign in crude black letters tacked to his chest was still quite legible. He possessed a forbidden weapon. Flash stood looking up at the gently swaying corpse. So, there are men on this planet, he reflected, and to have a weapon is a hanging crime. He walked on, and eventually the light of the late afternoon began to fade. A fuzzy darkness slowly filled the jungle. Flash halted. This should be just about the spot Zarkov came down, he said, as he glanced around. Dale will be further on. But there was no sign of Dr. Zarkov. Flash called through cupped hands. Doc? Doc, are you around? Hey, Zarkov! 3 crimson birds rattled up out of the brush and flew off into the gathering dark. Then Flash noticed something stuck on a thorny bush at the roadside. It was a shred of cloth. He plucked it free, a tough tan material. Torn from Zarkov's worksuit, he said. And this looks like a splash of blood on it. Near the place he'd found the blood-stained cloth, he discovered footprints. Yes, Doc's boot made that one for sure. These other ones, though, they're sandals of some kind. A few yards further along were signs of a struggle, footprints intersecting, brush trampled, branches broken. Flash decided, that's going to be a tough trail to follow. I better find Dale first. This jungle doesn't seem too hospitable a place even in broad daylight. No telling what it'll be like after dark. He started to run at a steady jog along the road. The night closed in, killing the last of the twilight. There was a clearing to the right of the road at the location where Dale should have landed. An oval pool lay in the center of the clearing. Frogs croaked hollowly beyond the pool's far edge. Dale, it's Flash. Are you here? A rustling commenced along the trees next to the pool. Dale, is that you? Out of the dark, a raspy voice said, If you seek the young woman, I can tell you where they took her. It was a small, bent man who spoke to Flash across the jungle pool. He wore a simple, mud-colored tunic laced with leather strings, rough-spun tights, and low boots of soft hide. His hair was long and unkempt, speckled with gray. You are an outlander, he observed in his harsh, raspy voice, as was the girl. You saw the girl? Asked Flash. Oh, yes, replied the bent man. Saw her as clear as I'm seeing you now. A pretty girl with dark hair. Too pretty, that's the trouble. What do you mean? I mean, Outlander, that is why they took her. Who was it that took her? The Royal Police. She was arrested? The bent man gave a dry, wheezing laugh. Too pretty for that, didn't I tell you? No, Outlander, they took her to the capital. You see, our Emperor is always interested in pretty young girls, And many's the maiden who's been dragged away to the imperial palace.
Your emperor?
Aye, Ming, ruler of the 12 territories. And soon, if he carries out all his plans, ruler of all the planet.
How long ago did they take her?
There is no chance to catch them, said the bent man, should that be what you're thinking of. By now they have placed her aboard a flying ship and flown her to Ming's palace.
How far from here is the capital city?
300 miles.
Where can I arrange to fly there?
The bent man's rasping laugh was louder this time. Would you end your life hanging from one of these trees, Outlander?
You mean the use of airships is forbidden too?
To all save the royal police and those in the Emperor's inner circle. If you would journey to the capital, however, I can show you the best route to take. My name is Harn, and I ofttimes serve as a guide.
Very well. I accept your offer.
My usual fee, Outlander, is 5 mingots a day.
I have none of your local money.
Eyeing the pack strapped to the tall man's back, Harn said, Perhaps you have some goods, some objects of value from your own land which can be exchanged for coins. There is an inn not far from here, the Heart and Arrow, and the innkeeper is a long-time friend of mine. He usually has a supply of ready cash to pay out for certain marketable items.
After studying the man's lean, wrinkled face for a few seconds, Flash said, All right, the Heart and Arrow it is.
A thick mist was spreading through the trees, streaking the dark with grey. The night sounds were muffled and dimmed. Harn quickened his pace along the narrow trail they'd been following. You were indeed lucky that I encountered you this night, he said. The night brings many dangers with it. We must hurry, Outlander. Suddenly, from off to their right came a loud thrashing noise.
Which particular danger are we running from? Asked Flash.
It sounded to my ears very much like a salamander, said Harn. The crashing and crackling echoed up ahead of them. Then Flash saw the creature. It was 9 feet long, a muddy green with splotches of yellow running along its thick, glistening body. It opened its wide mouth, and Flash saw that it had large, snake-like fangs. With a few more lumbering steps of its 4 squatty feet, the giant salamander blocked their path completely. Flash reached beneath his tunic. With his blaster pistol in his hand, he took 2 steps forward. The pistol sent a sizzling shot at the attacking monster. There was a faint, hollow, explosive sound, and the head of the giant creature turned to charred dust. "A miracle!" exclaimed Harn. "Great and powerful wizardry!" The headless salamander thrashed and writhed, crashing into tree trunks and trampling brush. Then it fell dead. After a glance around, Flash put his pistol away in his waistband. Harn came closer to him. "That is indeed a powerful weapon, Outlander," he said in a whispering voice. "Much more powerful than anything the royal police possess." He pointed at the tunic which concealed the gun. "You are wise to conceal it, for to be caught with such a weapon would mean certain death. You need not fear that I will betray you, Outlander, for now I owe you my life, and there is nothing Harn would not do for you." "All right. Let's press on to the Heart and Arrow. I want to get to the capital as soon as I can." Dr. Zarkov's broad back was pressed against the black rock wall of a vast cavern. Several yards across the cave, a small fire burned, sending sooty smoke up to vanish in the thick shadows. Seated near the fire were 3 lean men, wearing hooded robes and sandals. "I've been in captivity on 6 planets, 4 satellites, and 1 lesser moon," boomed the bearded scientist. "They always made a point of feeding me, especially on Jupiter, where they were fattening me up for an impending cannibal feast, which, fortunately, you must be patient." One of the robed men stood to face Zarkov. "These are difficult times on Mongo. Many people do not eat at all. It is especially difficult for us who are sorcerers. Wait until our leader arrives. We will see to all your needs then." Dr. Zarkov said,
"Let me ask you something which has nothing to do with food. When you grabbed me, something was said about my intelligence, my intellect. Granted, I'm one of the more brilliant men in the universe. Still, it's certain my reputation doesn't extend to Mongo."
"That is true, Dr. Zarkov. We believe one with your mental capacities can do much to aid the sorcerer's cause."
"But how did you know for sure I had such mental capacities?"
The lean sorcerer spread out his hands. "We read your mind. We see its dimensions. We learn your name." He produced a large knife and said, "I am going to cut your bonds now. Brother Anmar will be here soon, and you'll be dining with him."
"If he brings any chow," said Zarkov.
"He has provisions, no need to worry."
You can communicate mind to mind?"
"Yes, we worked out the basic principles before Ming banished us."
"Ming would be who?"
"The Emperor of the New Kingdom. After successfully overthrowing and conquering the legitimate governments of this area, he outlawed those of us who wouldn't work for him."
"This Ming fellow uses magic and sorcery to run his empire?"
"We were not always sorcerers." "You must forgive my associate. He sometimes overdoes the mystifying element in our guise." A tall, light-haired man of 40 had entered the cave. He wore a robe similar to the other sorcerers, hood back off his head. Throwing down a rough cloth sack of supplies, he said, "I am Brother Anmar. I'm happy to have a man of your intellect among us, Dr. Zarkov. I'm afraid for the moment we must keep you with us. There is a particular problem we need a solution to, and you seem qualified to lend a hand. In the morning we will begin our journey to the Forest Kingdom."
"What sort of problem?"
asked Zarkov. "It involves a weapon, a new type of blaster cannon for aircraft, which is not turning out as expected."
"Weapons are right up my alley,"
said Zarkov in his resounding voice.
"But I didn't come to Mongo alone. Have you plucked that fact out of my head yet?"
"Yes, I know about Dale Arden and Flash Gordon," replied the chief sorcerer. "I am sorry we can't spare you yet to search for them."
"Do you know if they're alive and kicking, and where they might be?"
Zarkov asked. Anmar gave a negative shake of his head. "We haven't devised an attachment yet, allowing us to tap the particular extrasensory ability needed to find out such information."
"Attachment?" bellowed the doctor. "You've been trying to con me, is that it? You're not magicians at all, you're—"
"Exactly," said Anmar. "We're scientists." Light and warmth spilled out of the open doorway of the Heart and Arrow. The room they entered was large, with a beamed ceiling and a big stone fireplace. There were a dozen round wooden tables around the room, a long serving bar against the near wall. 2 men in dark tunics and high-top muddy boots sat at a table hunched over copper tankards of ale. Behind the bar, giving most of his attention to tapping a fresh keg of ale, was the proprietor. He was fat, with a striped apron tied around his flabby waist.
"Good evening to you, Harn,"
he said, as he glanced their way.
"We wish a private dining room," said Harn. "My friend has travelled a good long way from a far-off territory. He's worn and hungry." He lowered his voice. "Later we would appreciate a small discussion with you."
"Take any room you fancy, Harn. As you observe, we're not doing a thriving business this night." Drumming his fingers slowly on the bar, Harn said,
"I think we must celebrate my friend's safe arrival. Do you have any of your special brandy left in stock?"
The innkeeper's left eyelid fluttered for an instant.
"The special brandy? Aye, that I do, Harn. As the gods would have it, a new supply has found its way to me this very day. Now and again a bottle or two reaches me by way of the great river."
Flash grinned.
"We will dine in that room beyond the fireplace," Harn told the fat innkeeper. "When you have the brandy ready, Serve it there, if you will." The small dining room had whitewashed plaster walls, a beamed ceiling, and a good-sized fireplace of its own. "I'll fix things so we can warm ourselves, Outlander," said Harn as he shuffled to the fireplace. Kneeling, he put a wax match to the kindling beneath the crossed logs. "There. It will soon be blazing heartily." The landlord coughed politely from the doorway. "Here is the brandy. You will find, sir, it compares favorably with the best you have ever sampled." "Of that I'm sure," Flash replied, taking one of the glasses from the tray the fat man held out toward him. Harn took the remaining glass, sniffing at it. "Ah, a wonderful scent to it," he said. "I will send the girl to take your order," said the landlord, as he withdrew and shut the door. "Well," said Flash, raising his glass toward the guide, "cheers." Harn hesitated, rubbing at his stomach. "You must forgive me, Outlander. The shock of our recent brush with death has just caught up with me. I feel I must sit quietly for a moment or two. Please, though, you go ahead and enjoy your brandy." "Very well, then." Flash turned to look into the now crackling fire. When he turned again to face Harn, his glass was empty. "You were right," he said. "It's an excellent—" Harn, poised on the edge of his chair, watched him closely. "What is wrong, Outlander?" I don't... Flash swung one hand out. He dropped to his knees, then toppled over on his side and lay still. "There's no risk, I'm telling you." Harn paced the wooden floor, carefully avoiding the still, sprawled Flash. "I've had much practice deceiving Captain Hakes." "Aye, but the captain surely knows this Outlander must have a weapon of an exceptional sort," said the landlord. "You told me yourself they found one on the girl's person while they were tying her." "I will simply tell him of our struggle with the salamander," said Harn. "The stranger's pistol was lost during that fearsome encounter. So far I have been paid a mere 50 mingots for entrapping this Outlander. There's no calculating what price the pistol might bring in certain quarters. I am sure the sorcerers would like to bid on it, and most certainly the lion men." "Lion men," snorted the innkeeper. "Threadbare rebels who live like savages in the wilds and dream of the overthrow of Ming. Why, they could not afford the price of a dinner at the Hard and Arrow, let alone something such as that pistol." "There is also Prince Baron," said Harn. The fat innkeeper shook his head. "He and his followers are still cowering in the Forest Kingdom, Harn, fearful of the wrath of Ming." "Perhaps. At any rate, I will take the pistol now, for I have but little time to hide it safely before we carry this Outlander down to the police ship at the wharf." "He's going to be heavy, I wager," said the landlord. "Lately, whenever I lift anything heavy, I get this frightful pain all across my—" "Let me save you the trouble, then," said Flash, bounding to his feet. "And here, Harn, is the pistol you're so anxious about." He pointed the weapon at the approaching guide and grinned. "I poured the brandy into the fireplace and only pretended to be unconscious. I had an uncle back on the planet Earth who warned me never to drink with strangers." "You have no chance, Outlander. The royal police know that the young woman had 2 men with her. They will not rest until they have the both of you." "As of now, they only have the girl?" "So I have been led to believe." "And she is in the capital?" "Aye, where you also will soon be," said Harn. Flash reached back into his rucksack, brought out a small coil of plastic rope, and said, "Tie up your friend here, landlord. Gag him well. Then I'll do the same for you. Be quick about it. I have an appointment with the royal police." From some of the windows of the wharf town came fuzzy yellow light, and out of one ramshackle building, smoke and noise and gruff laughter came tumbling. A moment after Flash passed its wide-open doorway, someone came flying out into the night to land with a huge, thumping splash in the muddy lane. "We may not love Ming here, but we'll have none of your revolutionary talk," shouted an angry voice from the tavern. "He needs more of a lesson, I'm thinking," cried another rough voice. "Let's teach him a good one, the shaggy rogue." Flash had turned to watch. The man on the ground was big and broad, wearing a leather tunic and a short kilt-like garment. He had a great mane of yellow hair, a thick beard to match, and a 3-foot-long tail with a tuft of yellow fur at its tip.
"Come on, then,"
challenged the Lion Man.
"Let us see how you fare against Tun."
A large man with a spiky black beard said,
"You've got no fight in you, you overgrown tabby."
Shoulders hunched, he came stalking toward the Lion Man. Another man materialized out of the swirling fog, moving silently toward the Lion Man's back, carrying in his hand a short wooden club. "Behind you!" warned Flash. Without turning, the Lion Man dropped to his knees. His tail slapped at his unseen assailant as the man's swung club hit nothing but air. Before Tun could rise, the black-bearded man leaped atop him. Another man ran from the inn to join the struggling pile. One more big man, this one with a soiled black patch over one eye, hurtled out of the cafe and piled on. Flash bounded to the struggling mound of men. "This isn't a fair contest," he said, as he grabbed hold of the man with the eye patch. He yanked the big man free of the tangle, sent him stumbling toward the hazy doorway of the inn.
"Much obliged,"
gasped Tun.
"I can handle these other two."
A hand shoved his face down into the mud. Flash caught another man by the shoulders. He sent him cartwheeling into the fog. Seconds later there was the sound of a body breaking through rotten wood. A great splash followed. "Might as well get rid of this last one," said Flash. He reached out toward the bearded man who was slamming Tun's shaggy head against the ground. Seconds later the man was lying unconscious on the roadway. The Lion Man was running his big hands over himself.
"I don't seem to have any more welts or lumps than I did when I started. They nearly put one over on Tun that time."
With a grunt he rose up off the floor.
"That's who I am, Tun. My people are called the Lion Men, a proud and fierce race, as you've no doubt guessed."
He held out his hand. Shaking it, Flash said, "I'm Flash Gordon." The Lion Man studied him for a moment.
"I've not exactly seen your like before, Flash. Where are you from?"
"From a planet called Earth," replied Flash. He explained his mission to Tun, told him of the crash of the survey ship, and of his subsequent search for Dr. Zarkov and Dale.
"Well, my friend," said Tun when he had finished, "I owe you a favor. You may need a little help getting hold of that police airship. Allow me to accompany you to the wharf."
"With pleasure," grinned Flash, and together they made their way through the dark, deserted streets to the riverside. They searched the area of the docks for nearly an hour without success. There was no sign of any police airship.
"What is your plan now, my friend?"
asked Tun. "I have to find out what's become of Dale. I have to reach the capital somehow."
"You will have a tough time of it, though I know well you can handle yourself. Yet to go up against merciless Ming single-handed, it is a difficult path you have chosen. I wish I could come along, but for a Lion Man to show himself in the capital would mean death. This tale of mine is most difficult to disguise. I think my best course lies in rejoining my people."
"How far must you travel to rejoin them?"
"The country of the Lion Men lies 100 miles to the south of us. A half-day's march will bring us to a riverside town named Tintura. I had better part with you there and return to my own land. I came to these parts to raise support for our struggle against Ming, but I think now that the best plan for my people is to unite with Prince Baron."
"Who is Prince Baron?" asked Flash. "I heard his name mentioned in the Heart and Arrow."
"Prince Baron is the rightful ruler of this part of Mongo. Ming forced his father from the throne and executed him. He lives in exile in the forest kingdom of Arborea, where he has steadily been gathering followers."
"And do you think that I shall be able to get to the capital from Tintura?"
"More easily than from here. Tintura is a smuggling port, and all manner of small ships sail down into the capital with no questions asked."
"All right," said Flash. "Let's try to get some rest until the rain stops, and then get on our way." The noonday sun was high in the sky, and Flash and Tun had been traveling south for several hours.
They trudged on in silence for the most part, the Lion Man's long tail occasionally twitching at the clouds of insects which buzzed around their heads. They were passing through swamp country, and were making good progress, when suddenly Tun shot a restraining hand out to halt his companion. He tilted his head back, sniffing at the misty air.
"That's odd," he said. "Something I didn't expect out here in the middle of this wretched swamp. It seems to have had some sort of accident."
Beckoning Flash to follow, he barged through a thicket of tall, clattering bamboo. Flash noticed the odor now. "There's been a fire. It's still smoldering." Tun forged ahead through intricacies of vine and branch.
"It was a vehicle of some sort, judging by the smell of the smoke. Perhaps even a flying machine."
Slowly they eased through the swamp, through the hanging, shaggy vines over the damp ground.
"There it is," whispered Tun.
50 yards ahead was a silver flying ship. It had crashed in the swamp, and the engine had caught fire. The nose end of the ruined ship was gutted, a blistered black. Jagged cracks filled the windows of the control cabin.
"No chance of patching it up for our own use," said Flash.
The Lion Man nodded.
"You see the insignia on the door?"
There was a golden sunburst painted on the now dented side of the craft.
"That is Ming's symbol. This ship belonged to someone from the palace. Let us investigate."
They had traveled only another 20 yards when, far off in the swamp, a girl screamed. Tun tore aside vines and brush with his huge hands. "Easy now," said Flash as he followed in the Lion Man's wake. "This could be some kind of trap."
"I think not. Those cries for help sounded too real. Aye, yonder is the girl."
Clinging to a low branch of a gnarled tree by her hands and feet was an auburn-haired girl. Her tight-fitting two-piece flying suit was torn and muddied. Watching the girl from below was a giant salamander, similar to the one Flash had encountered on his way to the Heart and Arrow Inn. Its jaws were wide open, the forked tongue whipping toward the dangling girl. The Lion Man said, "Let me see if I can handle this fellow, with the help of that marvelous pistol of yours." Flash handed over his blaster with a grin, and Tun went stomping off toward the huge creature. The salamander made a moist, fluttering noise as it watched the girl, waiting for her to let go of the branch and fall within range.
"Hey, you ugly brute!"
shouted Tun when he was near the beast's right side. The giant head lowered and inspected the approaching Lion Man.
"You'll cause no more trouble in these parts."
Tun squeezed the trigger, and a second later the salamander's head was turning to soot. Its body swayed, then tumbled over sideways. The jungle shook. As the girl lost her grip on the branch, Flash sprinted and caught her in his arms before she hit the ground. Setting her upright gently, he asked, "Were you alone in the ship?" She brushed back her long hair, smiling faintly at him. "Yes, I was alone," she said. She glanced at Tun's flicking tail.
"You needn't be unsettled. I am aware that lion men are unpopular in the palace, but we can't always select our rescuers."
"Please, don't be offended. I don't share the prejudices of those who rule Mongo. How did you know I was from the palace?" "Oh, yes, of course. You saw my fallen ship." She looked up at Flash. "I wonder how I'm going to get back home."
"We're on our way to Tintura. We're traveling on foot, but we can see you that far."
"If you don't mind a lion man for an escort," added Tun.
The girl smiled at him.
"I'd be very grateful if you'd both allow me to come along, and I'd feel much safer as well."
After a second, the Lion Man said,
"My name is Tun, and this is Flash Gordon."
The girl said, "I am Ilana. I am a servant of the Emperor's daughter, Princess Aura."
"She lets you borrow her flying ship?" asked Flash.
"Well, not exactly. I get very restless sometimes, cooped up in that palace, and, well, I take what I need to liven up things. Yesterday I borrowed an airship. I am, fortunately, a great favorite of the princess."
"I see," said Flash.
"When we reach Tintura, will you allow me to take you and Tun to dinner? There are one or two relatively decent inns there along the river. We can dine together, and then I'll make arrangements to get back home to the capital."
"We'd be happy to join you," said Flash. The dining room of the Cold Harbour Inn in Tintura was large, with stone walls painted a pale grey. Copper utensils and tankards hung from pegs in the ceiling beams. A fire blazed in the red brick fireplace. Flash, the girl, and the Lion Man were seated at a square table near one of the leaded windows. Tearing a chunk of brown bread off the loaf in the bread basket, the Lion Man said, "Now, in my home country, we'd call this bread a trifle bland. For real bread with some taste to it, you have to start with cornmeal. We grow our hay." He stood up so quickly that his chair flipped over and smacked the wooden floor. "Make no further moves, Lion Man," warned the Royal Police Sergeant, who was striding across the room toward their table. He held a blaster pistol in his hand. 5 other policemen accompanied him. "You should have stayed with your fallen ship, Princess Aura," the sergeant said to the girl. She remained seated, lips pressed tight together. "What means this?" demanded the Lion Man, his tail switching angrily back and forth. "You are not a servant, but the daughter of old merciless Ming himself." The princess kept her eyes lowered. "I'm sorry," she said. "If you will step outside, Princess, you'll find a flying machine waiting." "I'd rather stay with my friends," said Princess Aura. Toying with the clasp of his cloak, the sergeant said, "They'll be coming to the palace too. Had I my way, Princess, I would shoot them both down here and now, especially that half-human Lion Man. However, I have orders to gather recruits." "Recruits for what?" asked Harn. "The tournament," answered the sergeant. "You'll both be appearing in the arena tomorrow." Ming's bony fingers tightened around Dale's bare arm. "What better way to learn about my people than by witnessing an event such as this, my dear?" he said. "My people love the tournaments with their spectacle and excitement. Man against ape-man, man against tiger. Oh, I'm sure you're going to enjoy it." He smiled pleasantly. "Now come along. It is nearly midday. We must go to the royal box." Holding her arm, he guided her toward the gilded door of her chamber. "You will witness many unusual sights, I promise." Resignedly, Dale allowed him to escort her down a series of lofty corridors, then through an underground passageway. Finally, they emerged into a large, glass-enclosed box overlooking the arena. Several members of Ming's inner staff were already seated there. A moment after Ming ushered Dale to the seat next to his, the chief of police brought Princess Aura into the box. Ming drew his cloak tighter round himself before turning to speak to his daughter. "I am very pleased you have returned to the capital in time for this eventful day, my dear," he said, as he rested an elbow on the rail of the royal box. Stroking his beard, he surveyed the crowded tiers of seats. "A goodly crowd, every bench filled." He raised his right hand and waved it. From all around the great oval arena, trumpets blared. Uniformed men were stationed at 10-foot intervals, golden trumpets aimed at the clear, blue midday sky. The huge crowd of spectators applauded as a side gate of the arena swung open. 2 gigantic ape-men emerged, hunched, long, hairy arms swinging. One of them lifted a shaggy hand to shield his eyes against the glare of the sun. Next, 2 prisoners were prodded out of their tunnel into the arena. The crowd grew silent, expectant. The only sound in the arena was that of the pennants snapping in the light wind. An ape-man snarled, growled, then went charging toward the 2 prisoners. They were both small men of middle age. A few feet from them, the ape-man halted. More slowly, the second ape-man began stalking across the arena. The prisoners remained on the same spot. With a roar, the nearest ape-man leaped, grabbed hold of one of the men. He lifted the small man up high over his head and threw him full force against the stone wall of the arena. He jerked him up from the ground and threw him again. The audience cheered approval. The man was a bent and broken heap on the ground. Diving at him, the ape-man tore at his throat with his teeth, delivering the death blow. Dale looked away.
"You'll find the moment of the kill is the most fascinating part, my dear."
Ming took hold of her face, sharp fingers digging into her jaw, and forced her to turn her head back toward the arena. A moment later, the second ape-man killed the other prisoner. "They're saving us for the last, I do believe," said Tun. He was seated on a rough wooden bench, his broad back against the stones of the tunnel wall. Flash stood near the barred gate, watching the arena. "No one has survived so far," he said. "You hear the people out there, hooting and hollering?" said the Lion Man. He joined Flash at the gate. "Look, there are thousands of them sitting there, allowing that tyrant to tell them what to do. Yet if they had the courage to turn against him—" A big, bearded man approached and unlocked the gate. "Out into the arena, the both of you," he ordered. "See if you can't give the customers a better performance than the last few cringing devils." "We'll give you all a show, my lad," promised Tun. He squared his shoulders and went striding out into the sunlight. Flash followed. The gate shut and locked behind them. After a quick glance at the royal box, Flash turned his attention to the entryway. The door opened slowly, and two enormous yellow and black unicorn tigers padded menacingly out into the arena. They moved cautiously, bellies close to the ground. The silence of the crowd held. "Have you seen the likes of these rascals in your travels, my friend?" "Nothing exactly like them. The horns look deadly." "Aye, that they are. With one slash of a horn they can cut a man open." Tun watched the tigers, his tail switching in counterpoint to theirs. "Still, we'll have no trouble with this pair, I'm thinking." "Make that 3, said Flash. A third unicorn was emerging from the dark tunnel. "Fellow in the lead's getting set to jump," Tun pointed out. "I'll take him." He galloped toward the first unicorn tiger. The crouching animal's tail thrashed, and then it sprang. Tun dropped to his back, and as the tiger shot over him, the Lion Man kicked out with both his feet. The kick caught the beast square in the stomach, causing it to yowl and go slamming down to the ground on its side. Tun was upon the animal. Locking one powerful arm around its neck, he grabbed for the sharp horn at its base. Gritting his teeth, Tun twisted. There was a crackling snap, and the 1.5-foot-long piece of bone was in his hand. "Now I have me a weapon," he said. In a half-squatting position, he hopped a half-circle round the partially stunned tiger and sank the horn in the animal's heart, killing it. The second tiger ran by this struggle, green eyes watching Flash. It jumped for him without a warning twitch, clawing at his face and torso. Flash swung, hitting a hard blow to the tiger's skull. The animal went limp, toppling down on top of him. Flash tried to roll away, but the heavy tiger had him pinned to the ground. He heard growls and a roar. The third unicorn was beside them. It began to slap at Flash with one great sharp clawed paw. Following Tun's example, Flash got hold of the horn of the stunned tiger who was holding him down. His strong wrist rotated back and forth, and the horn snapped. The other tiger continued to worry his arm. The beast's fangs pierced the skin of his forearm, drawing blood. Flash stabbed out with the bone horn in his hand. The blow penetrated the biting tiger's skull and pierced its brain. A few seconds later, the animal's huge body collapsed, dead. The dazed tiger was stirring toward wakefulness now. Digging in with his elbows, Flash began to move himself out from under. "Spare yourself the trouble." Tun was approaching the unicorn from the rear. He lunged, caught hold of its tail, and gave it a fierce tug. The tiger howled as it was yanked off Flash. Keeping hold of the tail, Tun began to swing the animal. He let go, and the tiger went smashing into the arena wall, its skull crushed by the impact. Flash accepted Tun's proffered hand and got to his feet. "You got more than your quota. Come on, let's see what the Emperor will do now." He took hold of his companion's arm, and they walked across the field toward the royal box. The crowd, realizing no more tigers were to come, stood up and began to shout and wave their arms. A long stone platform stood immediately beneath Ming's glass box. Flash jumped up on this and grinned at the Emperor. "I am Flash Gordon," he called out, "of the planet Earth."
"And I am Tun, the Lion Man,"
said Tun, jumping up beside Flash. "We have won the contest and now claim our freedom," said Flash toward the box 10 feet above. Ming's breath fogged the glass as he leaned to look down at the two victors. Gradually, a smile twisted his lips, turning up the corners. "Here is what you have won for your friend and yourself, Flash Gordon." The entire stone platform fell away like a great trapdoor. Flash and the Lion Man went plunging down and down into the darkness. Flash awoke. He was surrounded by a thick blackness. He remembered falling a considerable distance and landing on rocky ground. After that he had passed out. "Tun," he called in a dry voice. "Tun, are you here?"
"By the one beady orb of the god of the waters," exclaimed Tun faintly. "That was a fall, was it not?"
"A good 20 feet.
From the feel of myself, I broke nothing essential."
Tun grunted as he sat up.
"How did you fare, my friend?"
"A few lumps and bruises, nothing more."
"Now you have seen for yourself how Ming the Merciless keeps his promises."
Flash said, "I imagine we're in one of his dungeons."
"Aye, and we may have seen the last of daylight. You know, my friend, I can understand why Ming hates me. It's only fair, after all, since the Lion Men hate him. You, however, are a pleasant lad come here to make a friendly visit."
"It must have something to do with Dale."
"Ah, I should have thought of that. Ming has no doubt taken a fancy to the girl."
Flash's fists clenched. "I'm afraid that's it."
"Someone is coming," whispered Tun.
The footsteps were light, barely sounding on the stones of the corridor outside. They halted in front of the cell door. Keys rattled softly, 2 locks clicked, and a bolt was drawn. The door swung outward. Princess Aura, wearing a full-length black cloak, with its hood hiding her auburn hair, stood there. She stepped into the cell. "Come with me quickly," she whispered. "I have an airship waiting." Flash took hold of her arm. "I can't leave the capital without Dale." "If you stay here, you'll die. You must come with me now, Flash." "You know where Dale is?" Aura said, "Yes, she's in the North Tower, in the women's quarters." "Tell me how to get there," said Flash. After a second's hesitation, the princess said, "Very well. Here is what you must do." She gave him detailed instructions as quickly as she could on how to get from the dungeons to the North Tower of the palace. "Tun, you go with Aura to the airship. When I have Dale clear of the palace, I'll join you. Aura, where is the ship hidden?" "On the outskirts of town, near the river." She told him exactly where the craft was. "Good luck to you then, my friend. We'll be waiting," said Tun. "Wait only an hour, no more." Flash stepped out into the corridor and moved away from them. It took Flash 10 minutes to travel through the walls of the dungeon, across a concealed catwalk into the walls of Ming's palace. He encountered no one. Finally, he reached the point inside the North Tower that he was seeking. He located a stone flower on the wall and twisted it a full turn to the right. A narrow slice of wall swung inward. Thick velvet draperies blocked his view. Flash listened for a moment before finding the slit in the curtains and parting them a fraction of an inch. He saw the door of Dale's apartment and a guard seated before it. He was awake. Flash coughed. The man sat up, glancing around. He left his chair and came cautiously down the marble floor of the hall. Flash's fist shot swiftly through the parting in the curtains to connect with the guard's jaw. Before the unconscious man could hit the floor, Flash had yanked him into the secret passage. Working rapidly, he bound and gagged the guard with strips torn from the man's own garments. After borrowing his cloak and keys, Flash stepped out into the corridor and moved silently closer to the door. He got the correct key on the second try, unlocked Dale's door,
and pushed it carefully open. He entered the apartment, closing the door behind him. The dark-haired girl was at the open door to the balcony, watching the night sky. She turned, saying, "You're not supposed—" "Flash!" She came running across the thick white fur rug to him. "It's taken longer than I planned to find you." "Oh, Flash!" She put her arms round him. Flash kissed her, then gently pushed her back. "We've got to get out of here right now, Dale." He led her towards the door. "Does Ming have Dr. Zarkov?" "No," she said. "Didn't you rendezvous with him after the crash?" "I was too late," replied Flash. "My guess is he was grabbed by someone, but if not by Ming's men, I don't know who." Dale gave him one more quick hug. "Okay, I'm ready," she said. Flash and Dale made their way out of the palace without further incident, and within 15 minutes they had joined Aura and Tun at the waiting airship. 5 minutes later they were in the air and heading for the country of the Lion Men. They set down some hours after sunset, on a ridge outside Tun's village, which was ablaze with light and movement. They made their way carefully and cautiously down into the village, which seemed to be crowded with people in party mood. Several rough-hewn oaken tables had been set out in the streets of the village. Thick tallow candles in copper holders sat on the tables, flickering and splashing yellow light amid huge platters of meat, bread, vegetables, and loose piles of fruit and nuts. "By the wart on the nose of the god of joy!" cried a shaggy, red-haired lion man who was in the act of raising a mug of ale to his lips. "It is Tun! Come home!" Other lion men and women noticed Tun and began to cluster round him, hugging him, kissing him, whacking him heartily on the back. There were about 200 lion men, women, and children filling the streets of the village, circling the feast tables. There were also some 50 men in tunics and tights of woodland green. Many of the men wore quivers of arrows on their backs. "What exactly," asked Dale, "is everyone celebrating?" "We have reached an agreement with Prince Baron's people," said one of the lion men with a grin. "Is Baron here?" A tall young man with light hair and moustache turned toward them. "The prince remains in Arborea," he said. "I am Tomo." He held out his hand to Flash. "I'll hazard the guess that you're Flash Gordon." Shaking his hand and grinning, Flash asked, "How is it you know my name?" Tomo smiled. "You don't yet realize you've become something of a celebrity on Mongo. And now that the Lion Men have agreed to fight with us against Ming, I think the tide will turn. We have 4 air cruisers with us, and tomorrow we will be returning to Arborea with the signed agreements which have been executed this day with the Lion Men. Will you come with us, Flash?" "I'd be happy to," said Flash. "We should be able to help you repair your ship after bringing it back from the jungle." Tun came bouncing up to Flash's side. He reached across him to shake Tomo's hand. "I am most happy that in my absence my people have had the sense to become your allies," he said. "I feel that all Mongo will soon be free." "Yes," said Tomo, "though it may require a long, hard fight." "Lion men like nothing better than a fight." Tun put an arm round Flash's shoulders. "Perhaps we can persuade Flash to fight along with us." "We'll see," said Flash. The air cruisers took off on the following day around mid-morning and headed for Arborea. For the first couple of hours the journey was smooth and uneventful. Then, suddenly, the midday sky grew dark. An enormously loud flapping sound surrounded them. Tomo leaped from his chair in the passenger compartment and ran to a window. "A great flock of them!" he shouted, "swooping down on us!" Flash and Dale hurried to join him. "What are those things?" asked Dale. "They're called harpy bats," said Tomo, as he watched the huge flying reptiles swarming outside. "One of the oldest surviving life forms on Mongo. Now and again the notion strikes them to attack our ships." The harpy bats hooted and screeched as they circled the air cruiser, coming within inches of the wings. Tomo had crossed to a communication panel and was giving out instructions. "Start firing at them," he ordered. The blaster beams began to sizzle and crackle. A giant harpy bat who had been diving toward their window was hit. His sharp green head turned to dust. Then another was blasted to soot as it swooped towards one of the wings. "Prepare to land," Tomo told the pilot. "We are fairly close to Arborea." "Flash, look!" said Dale, pointing. "They forced down one of our ships," said Flash to the preoccupied Tomo. "I've just called Arborea for some help," said the blonde-moustached young man. Flash's ship was successfully holding off the shrieking harpy bats. More and more of them were being destroyed. Their air cruiser had dropped 1,000 feet. Dr. Zarkov stood with one screwdriver held in his teeth and another in his right hand. He had been working on the blaster cannon in the ship's nose since a few minutes after dawn. There was a welter of tools spread all around him on the hangar floor. It was after midday now, and through the half-open door of the hangar the trunks of the huge trees of Arborea shone a bright gold in the sunlight. Zarkov made a satisfied sound.
Finished. All fixed. Haven't tested the thing yet, but I guarantee this blaster cannon will work several 100 times better than anything you boys have at the moment.
"Very good," said Anmar. "We've had word about your friends, Flash Gordon and Dale Arden. They're heading for Arborea. They escaped from Ming and were picked up by some of our people. The air cruisers in which they are all traveling are being attacked by a swarm of gigantic flying reptiles."
That doesn't sound too good.
"We are sending a fleet of ships to help them. You believe this air cruiser is ready to do battle?"
I guarantee it, boomed Zarkov in his loudest voice. So, let's get going.
Tomo jabbed a finger skyward. "Look at that, Flash!" he exclaimed. "Have you ever seen the likes of that?" 3 heavily armed rescue ships had arrived from Arborea. They were rapidly taking care of the flock of giant harpy bats. One ship in particular was eliminating more than its share of the flying reptiles. "What manner of weapon is mounted on that 3rd ship?" asked the excited Tomo. "It disintegrates the creatures instantly. I've never witnessed anything like this before." All the harpy bats had now either been destroyed or had retreated. The rescue ship dropped down to join the air cruisers in the forest clearing. Flash, taking Dale's hand, walked toward the ship which had been using the new type of blaster cannon. Before they reached it, a side door burst open, and a large bearded man in a green jumpsuit leaped out.
I knew it would outshine anything available on Mongo. What do you think of it, Flash?
"A great breakthrough on the harpy bat extermination front, Doc," said Flash, grinning. Dale threw her arms around the burly scientist. "Zarkov, you're not dead."
Dead? With my constitution? I hear you've been giving Ming all sorts of trouble, Flash. Killing off apes and tigers, lions.
"Only tigers," corrected Flash. "The lion men I made friends with. Speaking of which, they've promised to find our survey ship and bring it here to Arborea so it can be patched up." Zarkov tugged at his beard.
Oh, yes, the survey ship.
"You don't sound very enthusiastic about getting it fixed," Dale told him. "Don't you want to get back to our orbiting lab?"
Eventually, answered the doctor. I tell you, there are several interesting problems I know I can lick right here in Arborea. The biggest of which is Ming.
He paused a moment, then asked,
Would you mind staying on here a while longer, you two? There's a good deal to be done.
"Well, what do you think? Did Flash, Dale, and Zarkov return to their orbiting lab? Or did they stay on Mongo to help in the fight against Ming the Merciless?"